What's up, folks? It's your boy DT 2.0, and today we have another versus. Now, I covered both of these laptops in previous reviews, so if you want, you can check those out at the links in the description. But this is them going head to head: the Alienware M15R3 versus the Alienware M15R4. Can you tell the difference between the two? I can. Like, I got twin sisters, and most people who just meet them can't tell a difference. But after seeing them and living with them for a while, I can tell the difference, and the motherfucker still can't. Well, guess what? I can. And there's one simple thing that I'll go over later. Now, I'm doing this just in case you're deciding between last year's model or whether to save some money and with a few sacrifices, or this year's model where you can put that stimulus check that you got, because I know y'all got money, to work. And you can have somewhat some bragging rights, you know, and also you can future-proof yourself. Now, you know how I am. I'm never going to tell you what to buy. Never going to do that. Just what I would buy, or in this case, what I have purchased. And again, can you tell a difference between the two? Probably not. So during this versus, instead of going over my normal loves, likes, dislikes, concerns, and recommendations, I'm going to go over 5 different things: the outside, the inside components, the display, and in this case, I have dual 4K OLED ooey goodness on both, the performance, and then last but not least, a conclusion. No recommendation on this one, obviously, because I think that you'll find that both of these laptops are great. I use them for music and video editing and have not had any particular issues with either. Just, well, any major issues with either. Now, I've been having the R3 for about 8 months and just got the R4, and I have had some time to put them in the ring together and let them go at it. What did I find out? Let's get into it. Round 1, the outside. Now, these two mugs are twins, and I said it earlier about my sisters. Literally, like two people that went to a Halloween party with the same damn costume on. Different on the inside, on the outside. Did I say that right? Different on the inside, same on the outside. There's absolutely no difference between them except that the trim on top that went from piano black to matte black. And that's how you can tell the difference between these two computers. On the R4, it's matte black here. On the R3, it's piano black that I have to keep constantly wiping. I even got a little mark right here. Let me scratch that shit off. To keep clean. A welcome addition, might I add. A welcome addition. Because on this piano black, this is the only part of the display that I absolutely have to touch when I'm opening the lid. And every time I will open it like this and then have to do this shit. You know, and sometimes if my hands are not clean, you know, like I was just finished eating some chicken and shit, I gotta wipe the shit again with a napkin or something. So everything is the same, right? From the keyboards, and I'll get into that soon, the junk in the trunk in the back, the vents, the ports, the port selection, everything is just about the same, and I just didn't expect them to do anything dramatic from year to year anyway, right? It's just like the car manufacturers when you buy a new car from last year's. They just change a few minor things, and at the same time, the outside looks pretty much the same with the exception of like the fucking rims or the badge or something, you know? But then when you finally buy one, like I bought the R4, next year's model is probably going to, you know, be a completely redesign, and then you want to get rid of this one, but it's too late because you've already committed. Anyway, so what do I think? And I said this in my review of the M17R4, was that it was a missed opportunity for Dell to not include something extra in the R4 versions to make you want to splurge for a newer model. Extra ports, better speakers, or whatever. But they just went the easy route and just kept the shit the same, right? They just kept the shit the same. And I get it. I understand. You have to save money. You have to stick with this model. It's a good design, right? It's flashy, and you have to want flashy. You have to like flashy. But still, give me something extra. Say, hey, if you get the R4, you get an extra few USB ports in the back. Or if you get the R4, you get a different keyboard. Now, they did add an option for a keyboard, a different keyboard, and I'll talk about that when I go over the keyboard. God damn it. Anyway, I'm gonna leave that in there too, because this is real. But don't hate on my frog either. I saw that Home Goods and it just called me like a puppy in a SPCA. Take me home. Anyway, but they're exactly the same. The only other thing that's different about these with the ones that I purchased are the keyboards. I messed up and ordered the 4-zone keyboard on this one instead of the per key keyboard that I have on the R3, and I'm absolutely hating the shit. You may not be able to see it in the camera, but I can definitely see it. It's clearly not as bright, and the keys feel a tad bit different than the per key keyboard that I have over here. Now, it may be just me overthinking it, because there should be no difference other than the lighting, but it just feels different to me, and I hate it. So my recommendation is just to pay the extra damn $30 and get the per key keyboard, and you won't regret it. Now, as I said earlier, they do have an extra option on this year's model, on the R4 model, to have a what they call a Cherry MX keyboard, a low profile Cherry MX keyboard that's that's added, but that adds an extra $150 to your bill. So I don't know how important keyboards are to you, but I don't know if it's $150 addition that's worth it, right? Cherry MX, I have it on this keyboard that I have over here. This is also an Alienware keyboard. It feels okay, but it's not the same as the one on this one, where they advertise it as a low profile Cherry MX keyboard. So I'll be interested to see. Maybe I'll send this one back and get the Cherry MX keyboard to see how it goes. Who knows? Other than that, that's the outside. Inside components. Now, there are a few differences in the inside of the computers that separate them, and one is the Intel i7 processor, both the 10th gen, but for some reason the R4 has a slower 10870H processor, and the M15 R3 has a 10875 processor. Nothing to be alarmed about though, because they are both 8-core, and the only difference between them is about 0.1 gigahertz of speed difference. Advantage M15 R3. Now, there may be some other differences overall that help with the cooling, but we'll leave that to the performance area. Is there a big difference? We'll see. Next, the RAM. 2666 on the megahertz or hertz on the R3, and 2933 megahertz on the R4. So the RAM is a tad bit faster on the R4. Again, will there be a big difference? We'll see in the performance area. And the biggest difference, and not the last difference, is the graphics cards. Right, the M15 R3 has the RTX 2070 Super, and the M15 R4 has the RTX 3070, which just hit the streets technically. Now, we already confirmed in my unboxing that this is not the Max-Q variant, so there's no limitations on it. Right, this is the full mobile 3070. Now, there is no super variant of the 3070 that I can think of, as far as I know, so it'll be interesting to see how these match up in the performance piece. Next, the fans, exactly the same. Right? They sound exactly the same. Now, I told y'all before that fan noise does not bother me, but I'll let y'all hear them side by side in an extra graphic. But they don't bother me, and they sound exactly the same. They sound a little bit different than the M17, just a slight high-pitched whine, but nothing like the Razer that has a constant whine even when it's not kicked up. They do get loud. They are noticeable, but if you have some headphones or if you have some speakers, you won't notice them at all. These speakers are not loud enough to drown them out, so you'll hear them. So if they bother you and and they get on your nerves, definitely get you some headphones or some good speakers. Next, for the inside, and last but not least, is the battery. And again, y'all know how I feel about batteries, but in case you are wondering, I don't give a shit about battery life, or I don't test battery life, right? I would expect the battery to be a little bit better on the R4, but not to the level where you'd even notice. At the end of the day, I purchased a gaming computer with a 4K OLED 400-inch screen. I didn't buy this shit for the battery. That shit's plugged in, or this shit's plugged in 90% of the time. You unplug this thing and try to play a game, performance drops, and you're getting about an hour before it kills itself off. Don't buy a gaming computer based on battery life, because in my opinion, there will be trade-offs if the battery lasts long. It's either gonna be underpowered or big as fuck. And I don't want either of those, and you shouldn't either as a hardcore gamer. Got it? We're square? So if you have any problems with that, you can hit me in the comments, but if it's some shady shit, I'm not gonna respond to you. It is what it is, right? Everybody has their own opinion about battery life, right? But I'm not going to class, or I'm not going to Starbucks with an Alienware computer. That just tells the teacher that I'm probably not typing what you're saying. I'm probably trying to get a few hours in while I'm at school. Anyway, that's the end of the insides. Now let's move on to the display. Display, no secret here. Y'all know what I like. Y'all know I like those 4K displays, and I got them on each one of these. right? The displays are exactly the same. 4K OLED, 400 nits, 100% DCI-P3 color gamut, and a 1 millisecond response time. Super bright, super crispy, with the right amount of saturation. You will not be disappointed with this display. The only thing people complain about is it's 60 hertz and it's on a 15-inch monitor. And I get it. You want those frames to be high to get that competitive edge, but if you are not playing competitively, you can use this screen and not have an issue. Don't listen to what other people think. I have motherfuckers going in the comments typing paragraphs about why 4K is not good for 15-inch displays, or it doesn't make a difference. Hey, I can't help it if you can't see the difference. That's not my thing. Or I can't help it if somebody told you that and it's ingrained in your brain that 4K doesn't belong on a small display. Folks out there, get what the fuck you want. Get what makes you happy. I got what makes me happy. I did it last year and I'm doing it this year. The only thing I'm not happy about this one is a damn keyboard that I fucked up on, and I messed that up royally when I went through too fast through the ordering process because I wanted to get it in good timing, which I did, but at the same time, I thought I can deal with 4Zone. I can't deal with 4Zone. Anyway, if you can deal with the 4K, if you can deal with the 60 hertz, you will not have a problem. I guarantee you, once you have these computers and you put them next to a 1080p display, you're going to make a choice, and it's going to be the one that you've been fooled about for the longest. You're going to select the 4K display. Guarantee. That's why I did it. I ordered two. I don't know if y'all looked at my earlier reviews, but I ordered two. I ordered one with the 300 hertz display, and then I ordered one with the 4K display. I put them side by side, opened them shits up, looked at them, closed the one with the 1080p screen, and put that shit back in the box. It was going back immediately. I was like, I'll deal with the 60 hertz. Anyway, 60 hertz is good enough for the games I play. Again, they might be good enough for, it might not be good enough for the games you play, but again, at least try it out. At least try it out. It's hard to get a hold of these things. You have to get them specially built, you know, and shipped, and it takes a week or two to get there. Wait, you got a 30-day return policy. So it is what it is. Try it out. If you don't like it, throw it back in the box. The return process is easy as cake. You go in there, click a few buttons. They send you a return label, throw it back in the box, and go drop it off at UPS. Put your other one on order. No problem. No problem. Or go buy the one from Best Buy, and you get it in 2-3 days. No problem. You know. So with that, that's all for the differences. There's really no difference between the two till we get to the performance. And let's do that right now. Now let's get into the meaty portion and where most of you have been waiting for, and that's the performance. Now, I've already compared them, at least the R3, in my review of the M17, and I tested all three, and I put the results up there. But I went ahead and also stress tested them using the 3D Mark, right? In case you haven't seen my review, here's what I found. While playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, there was about a 10 to 15 frames per second difference between the M15 R3 with the 2070 Super and the M15 R4 with the 3070, with resolutions below 4K. But keep in mind, that's just one game. If I changed it to 4K and cranked up the ray tracing, the R3 would struggle and basically not be playable, where the R4 would have less frames but still be playable. I'm talking 30 to 40 frames per second with on the R4, where the R3 was really 20 to 30-ish frames per second, and most times dropping below 20 frames per second with ray tracing on Ultra, because it's all or none for me. I don't play. If I turn ray tracing off and play that 4K, and again, folks, I get it. Well, why are you playing that 4K? Because it's a fucking 4K screen. Why would I not? The game gives me the option, so why would I not? It is what it is. But the R3 would have an almost stable 35 frames per second, which is playable. It's playable. 35 frames per second is playable. I get it, right? Nowadays, you know, younger gamers, that's all they know is 60 and above, where I saw 60 frames per second for the first time, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, and it was rare. I actually saw it in Madden and couldn't believe my eyes. But before then, it was always 30 frames per second. I was completely satisfied. So yes, it's almost stable 35 frames per second on an R3 at 4K with ray tracing off, where the R4 would have a very, very, very stable, and I mean stable, 60 frames per second. Basically maxing out the display. Unbelievable for a card, the 3070, to push those pixels that smoothly with no issues. No issues at all. I sat there with my mouth open because that OLED display was finally doing what it was made to do and it couldn't do last year, to push those 4K games at maximum screen speed at 60 frames per second. And it was exactly the same with Outriders and Gears of War. I could not believe what I was seeing. Now, I can test a shitload of other games. Yes, I can. But I won't. Only other games I think will push these cards. Only the games that I will push these, I'm fucking up. Anyway, only the games I think will push these cards, so please don't ask about individual games unless you want to cash app me some shit and then I can buy them and play them for you. But I know people don't do that, and nor would I accept anybody's money. Not like that. As I said before, I'm now using 3D Mark to even the feel and keep from downloading those individual games. So in this case, I put both computers in performance mode and ran Time Spy Extreme, which is a 4K 3D test. There is a Time Spy test, but it only tested at 1080p. I used the Port Royal test, which is a test that tests the ray tracing portion. And of course, I used the Time Spy Extreme stress test. And that just runs the Time Spy Extreme test, which tests 4K 3D, over and over again to test two things: frame rate stability while under a high load. And for this test, it needs a score of at least 97% to pass. And I said that before. The only way you can get a passing grade is 97%. That means that class is hard as you know what. Anyway, let's check out what I found. Using Time Spy Extreme, the M15R3 scored a 3917 and the M15R4 scored a 5131. Now with the M15R3, that would equate to an 80 frames per second Battlefield 5 or playing Battlefield 5 at 1440p. With the M15R4, that would go up to 105 frames per second playing Battlefield 5 at 1440p. And I know what y'all thinking, well, why'd you come up with the results in 1440p? But that's what 3D Mark gives you. That's what they tell you. They don't give you an option to see if it tests for, see what it would equate to if you were playing in 4K. Whew, I need to stay out the liquor. Anyway, using the Port Royal test, M15R3 scored a 5081. And the M15R4 scored a 6391. And that it would equate to an 85 frames per second and 100 frames per second on the R4, which is a 15 frames per second difference between the two. Now, using the Time Spy Extreme stress test, both passed. Now, I had them both in performance mode, and I had them both in high performance and performance mode. So the fans were blaring, and the pretty much the power was, hey, just go until you can't go no more, right? Or until we start throttling. And the M15R3 scored a 97.3, which is a pass, and the M15R4 scored a 97.5, which is a pass. So they both passed. But the biggest difference between the two was the CPU and the GPU temperatures, where on the M15R3, it was tapping out at 90 to 100 degrees for both the whole time. Whereas in the M15R4, the CPU and the CPU and GPU was just cruising at a cool 75 degrees each. So if that matters to you, you already know which one you want to pick. So overall, it's obvious that we need the R4, right? Well, in my opinion, it's a hard sell for me. To me, the difference between 80 frames per second and 100 frames per second playing Battlefield 5 at 1440p for the games I play is null and void. You're not going to be playing at that frame rate on either of these computers anyway, unless you connect it to an external monitor, and in this case, Advantage M15 R4, because you'll be able to get those higher frame rates. Especially if you drop it down to 1080p especially when you drop it down to 80p. If you do that for either of these computers, then they'll perform, I believe they'll perform about the same, right? They're both in the same ring, boxing 12 rounds with a split decision at the end. The biggest difference here is the temps. If you game for long hours with no cooling pad to help out, no AC on, your R4 may last longer as the components will generally stay cool over a period of time. High heat applied to anything will break it down. Even more so in electronics and especially on computers. This is no different. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, right? You want something that runs a little bit cooler, or you'll be satisfied saving the $200, $300, $400, $500 by getting this one. but you know your components run hot, but you can temper your gaming to adjust to that while you're saving that money. Thoughts. Now on to my conclusion. In conclusion, I love saying that shit. If you have no intention to play your games at 4K on your laptop or on an external display like I have back there, then the R3 is fine. It's just fine. But if you're like me and you gotta have that ooey goodness, you gotta push it to its limits, you gotta be a show off, using this display for all its glory and what you paid for, the R4 is your baby. It's going to give you, it's going to shut people up that says 4K on a 15-inch. It just doesn't make any sense because it can't push past ABC. It's going to get you 60 frames per second. It's going to be a stable 60 frames per second. And it's going to look smooth as fucking. If you didn't have the 60 frames per second just playing like I did at the bottom of the screen, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right? Playing the games that I play, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Now, if you game a lot for long hours, the R4 may be your best bet because of the better cooling, which would amount to adding to the longevity or maybe adding to the longevity of your purchase. I'm not going to say it lasts longer so you guys can catch me and say, hey, DT, you motherfucking told me it'll last long, but the shit overheated anyway. Hey, I can't help it if you game for 20 hours a day, right? Be mindful of that. I'm not going to tell you what to buy. Just make the suggestion. That's it. Anyway, like I said before, the heat will break this thing down at some point, or the throttling overall, when it is overheating, can affect your gaming experience. Now, some folks will talk about repacing and undervolting, and I appreciate it because sometimes they put it in the comments about, hey man, you can do this and you can do that. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate it, but I like to keep my shit under warranty until it's out of warranty. Does that make sense? Right? I don't want to break this thing open, take off the motherboard, flip it over, do that shit, and then put it back in, and then I fuck some shit up, have like 4 or 5 screws left over, and now I need somebody to come out here and get it fixed, and then they realize, hey, you've been tampering with it. We can't fix it. Now you got to pay for it. I'm just saying. As I said in my last review, I'd rather break last year's Christmas toys instead of this year's Christmas toys. That way my mama don't kick my ass. Plain and simple. Anyway, I'm not going to pick a winner because I believe both of these computers are great in their own right, and either one you pick is a win. It's a win-win situation. If you do decide to go with the R3, go to the Dell refurbished store and save that extra money and stay away from the scratch and dent and get the ones that's actually labeled refurbished. You can save some major funds and get decent performance out of them. They look exactly the same anyway, right? Look at these motherfuckers. Unless somebody really know these computers, they wouldn't be able to tell whether you got an R3, R4, whether you have the 2060 chip, 2070 chip, or 2080 chip. They wouldn't be able to tell. They wouldn't be able to tell at all. They look exactly the same. And I can't lie, right? You can buy this computer and say it's an R4 and nobody would know the difference. And that's real talk. Like wearing a pair of fake Jordans at night. I ain't tripping unless I am. Anyway, that's all I have. So if you have any more questions, hit me in the comments. I'll try to respond when I can, because I do like responding to comments and people that need help or want more input on their purchase. But I'm never, ever going to tell you what to buy. Just what I would buy. And I'm not telling you what to get. Once again, this is DT 2.0. Thanks for watching. Peace, people.